Good morning, hello, and welcome to Barcelona, welcome to ISE, welcome to our Microsoft Teams Rooms panel. We've chosen Microsoft Teams Rooms as the first subject that we're going to cover because it's perhaps the most interesting development of the last 2 years, certainly the mass adoption of cloud video conferencing platforms in general, and Microsoft Teams Rooms in particular, I think has dramatically changed the use of technology in the workplace, or will do. Now, Microsoft Teams Rooms, certainly its mass adoption, is fairly new. The hybrid working arrangements it will support, they're fairly new too. And the technology ecosystem around it, certainly the program of certification, that's fairly new as well. So I think it's a great subject for us to get some expert advice and guidance on. And to help us with that, we have 5 guests today. From Microsoft, we have Michel Bouman. Michel is EMEA Partner Technical Lead for Microsoft Teams Rooms. We have Greg Jeffries. Greg is Chair of the Avixa Standards Steering Committee, and he's Managing Director of Visual Displays Limited. From Crestron, we have Neil Fluester. Neil is Global Director of Technology Alliances and also a bit of a broadcaster himself with Crest TV. From Project Audiovisual, we have the Chief Operating Officer, Steve Hudson. Steve. And from Kinley, we have John Vendenbrand. He's the Global Head of Microsoft Solutions. So thank you all for joining us today. And I think we should kick off by asking, what are the benefits of having Microsoft Teams Rooms installed successfully in an organization? Why this platform? Would anyone like to start?
I think it's ease of use. I think that's the biggest thing. Is you invite a room, you've got a one-touch join. It's inclusive for everybody. It's just so simple.
Yeah.
One invite, one touch, one join, you're there.
It's a repeatable experience as well. In the old days of video conferencing, you walk into one room and you would run it and set up a call completely different on a Monday to then another room on a Tuesday. The great thing that Teams does is it level sets, it creates that baseline. You walk into a room on a Monday, whether it's a big, large boardroom or a small huddle room, and you get that familiar experience. It looks like Teams, it looks like what I use on my desktop, and you don't get that fear of how do I set up a call, how do I invite people in there. It's that really nice experience that, again, we're all used to using on our PC, our desk or our home, and just delivers that into a meeting room.
But I think if you take it up like to a 30,000 level, right, the issue that we need to fix is a lot of companies are now moving back to the offices. Luckily, because I'm happy to see you all here, we couldn't have done that in the past 2 years, right? So previously, before the pandemic, if you were dialing in virtually on a call, you were basically a fly on the wall. If you were lucky, you had a speaker puck, right, sitting on the table. Maybe there was someone with a laptop, preferably a Surface, and open it, and then you had a webcam kind of pointing at you. But you always felt like a fly on the wall. You never had the idea of what was happening in the room. Then when we all shifted to remote work, we were all at this level playing field all of a sudden. Everybody was the same, right? We could see each other, we could talk to each other, we could see some nonverbal going on in our faces. We could use raise hand function, right, to politely raise your hand if you want to speak up, which is very difficult if you're dialing in virtually and you have a bunch of people sitting in the meeting room. Now when we shift back to the office, we have to create this level playing field again. And I think with Microsoft Teams Rooms, and to Neil's point, right, so the experience that people already have using the Teams application, we're bringing that familiarity from a user perspective into the room so that we can create this level playing field, but also from an IT admin perspective. Right? If you want to manage the room properly, you manage it from one console. Right? So from a usability and a security perspective, I think Microsoft Teams Rooms is the way to go.
I think the dominance that Teams Rooms has assumed over the last couple of years has been the really useful, campfire for the whole hybrid working experience. And I think that, you know, thinking about what this show is going to be about, you know, for me, it's you know, it's not just the functions; it's the actual experience of the room itself, taking a holistic view of the room design, how everything has an impact on something else, and it's that kind of spatial thing, that coming back to the 3D world, as you're saying, and of course. This won't be the last time you hear me say this, but of course the use of standards here can be absolutely essential to really helping people, you know, see the way through. And you can stop laughing at me.
We briefly spoke about this outside, about the standards of rooms going in and how rooms have got to be put in to be successful.
Yeah.
And even down to, we mentioned that now we've got from the moment we speak to a client through to delivery, we have a 57-step process now to make sure that room is delivered and everybody gets that same experience. Yeah. And I think it's essential that everything
Heinz didn't send their lawyers after you for the 57 room.
Absolutely.
I think it's very important that the customer does make the right, he picks the right type of rooms, because what we really focus on, what everybody's really focusing on, is always the standard meeting room. But there's such a lot of other possibilities to use Microsoft Teams rooms for. Being a studio, being a co-creation room, being a workshop room. There's all kind of different setups. And when customers want to go hybrid, then they all choose the standard meeting rooms. And that's something I think we should change. Yeah.
I think something else coming back to that is, what is a standard room? Because not every room's the same. Acoustically, visually, every room's different. So when people talk about, I just want a standard room, is any room standard? We've all seen the rooms where you've got those acoustic properties that make it challenging. So I think it's, again, you've got to see rooms to understand what needs to go into them, how to specify them and how to deliver, because we're talking about a simple platform. We're talking about something that makes everybody inclusive. Yeah. So straight, one-touch join, we're in. And I think it's to make sure that we don't overcomplicate a very simple system.
I think the other thing that Teams has done is the fact that, you know, in the old days with things like Skype for Business, you have to open up firewall ports, and, you know, again, you had to have a like-for-like system. You were calling one 323 or SIP system to another 323 SIP system. You send someone a Teams invite, and the user has choice. I can take the call on my iPhone, my Android, my PC, my Mac. I can send it to a room. It doesn't matter. I don't care what device you're going to dial in from. I send you a Teams invite for 10 o'clock on Tuesday, and I know that you're not going to have a problem. You're going to click on a link, some magic's going to happen, and suddenly you're going to appear in a room, on a phone, on a desktop, and everybody's going to be able to join into that, whatever platform they're on. That again, that's that great level setter that Microsoft have done.
And that's the flexibility you offer to the end user, so the employee who's using Microsoft Teams. Because we talk about hybrid work, but I think we should talk about the future of work instead of hybrid work. Because everybody think hybrid work. Oh, I'm done with that phrase. But
everybody's got a different opinion on what hybrid work is. You ask one client and then go to the next client, and it's a completely different.
The completely different perspective on hybrid work. And,
but I think there's also a big responsibility for all of us, right? To really help customers to envision what's possible, right? And don't just think and that might sound weird coming from a Microsoft guy, don't just think about the device, right? Think about, like you said, the acoustic. Think about furniture, right? How do you set up the table? Where do you set up the table? How do you create escape rooms in a meeting room when somebody needs to exit to have a brief phone call? What do you do with people that come in late, right? So I think it's an opportunity for all of us to redefine what meetings are, but also from an AV perspective, from an IT perspective, and also from facilities and HR perspective.
But if we look how rooms have come on in the last 18 months and how the platform has changed, I mean, when the pandemic hit, we've probably video moved on by 10 years in the first year, and you know, we're all still catching up with the platform and the idea of it, I think.
It's a entire experience as well, because again, a lot of people can talk about, we can put a device, we can put a camera in, we can put a tabletop speaker in, as you say, but the fact that you can schedule through Outlook, through Teams, have that appear on a team scheduling panel outside the room, or you're walking down the room, I want to book this room, and it's that entire experience. You walk in, and again, the value that we provide around occupancy sensors, switch the lights on, switch the AV on, so the user doesn't have to think. They come in, I'm coming in for my sales meeting, I'm not coming in to be an AV professional and work out what input I should be on and how to operate all this tech. I want my sales meeting, my marketing meeting. That's why I'm going into the meeting room, not to work out tech. And again,
not believe the amount of customers that still want to overcomplicate a room. We say to them, you know, stop it. Yeah. You're working on one platform. Keep the simplicity that, and again, the fact that you can go in any room, any space, and you've got that same experience. It's key.
Yeah, it's that repeatable experience, the cookie cutter approach. So you can say, okay, that large boardroom, that huddle room, that open space, the person from HR, marketing, finance can just go in, hit the button, the magic happens, and you join the person at home, in the office.
The tiny thing I like the most is PowerPoint Live, to be honest, because in the early days when you started PowerPoint and there was a video in there, everybody was complaining on the other side that they couldn't see it or couldn't hear it, and now with PowerPoint Live, that's one additional feature I really like about Microsoft Teams Rooms and Microsoft Teams.
For people that don't know what PowerPoint Live is, so so there are 3 ways to share your screen on Teams, right? So you can share the full screen, then you share the full screen. You can share just the window, right? But then everybody's always complaining, I cannot see chat or I cannot see the videos anymore, right? So now with PowerPoint Live, what happens is if you go to the share tray in your Teams application, you hit PowerPoint Live, scroll down, hit your presentation, it loads the presentation from the Microsoft Cloud, right? So it basically streams it. And that means that we can optimize the quality of the presentation. Now it might take a little bit more time for it to load, right? Because it downloads it from the cloud, but it's basically prepared for everything that you need to do during the presentation. So now if you start streaming video, you'll get 30 frames per second on the video, but also things like translating in real time. Right, so if you are, I was on a call with a French customer the other day, and they said, don't you have this presentation in French? I said, well, if you come down, click the 3 buttons and select French, my slides are now in French, right? And so that's the kind of stuff that PowerPoint Live brings. So I think that's a good point. But let's not mistake, so as easy as everything is, there is a big difference between Microsoft Teams Rooms and then the plug in your webcam into a USB port, right? Because that's definitely not when you get the full experience.
And I think a lot of people in lockdown, were panicking because there was these kind of unlocking. Everyone comes back to you. They rushed and put these, cheap USB, bring your own device, and let people sort of self-serve. And the challenge that brings that you've got to have that 5-minute setup of like, have you got the right drivers? Have you got the right USB? Plugging in the HDMI, plugging in, is the screen resolution right? That's not a great experience in a meeting room. And again, that's what a full MTR will give you, as that, okay, you come in and have your meeting on a device rather than this kind of, bring your own laptop and bring your own mess of cables and connectors.
We are a massive advocate of setting up a Teams room if you do want a BYOD functionality to bring that in. And to be fair, the Flex does that extremely well.
Sorry, Greg, you were going to say?
No, I just think it speaks to where this all has to go, because if you look back over the last couple of years, there was just that huge rush to get that functionality in place, and it was okay to have a room with messy cables and bring and all these devices there, just so long as you could actually the organisation, college, school, whatever, could function. But now, I think the challenge is how you take all these lovely functions that Microsoft seem to be adding almost by the minute, but how we translate that out into the 3D space and turn that into the good experience. From function into the experience.
Because what you see now, there's a lot of customers investing in 2 to 3 rooms, and then try to get the right experience, but they're not getting the right experience because of the technical side of things, but also they didn't really talk to their own employees. What is it that their own employees want? And what you see now is in most cases, they reach out to IT and say, okay, we need to go hybrid, just fix it. And they bring in the technical side. But then you have to look at the network, you have to look at adoption, you have to look again at the workflows.
Massive.
Yeah, there's a lot of things you have to take into account before you can make the right decision and implement the right type of rules.
But all of that, turning features into experience, I think that's the main thing. I'm sure we'll talk about front row and stuff like that in a second, right? It's all about how do you actually use the tech stuff to make people's lives easier. Right? Setting up these cables, I think research shows it takes about 12 minutes a meeting, which is horrendous.
And no one gets there 12 minutes beforehand. You get there 1 minute beforehand, and then it's like.
So how do you leverage what we put in the device from a spec and feature perspective, and how do you make those, to your point, into experiences for people to make it more natural, right? I think that's the whole goal, to make it more natural.
Yeah. I think when you were saying about that, I think this whole thing about talking to users in the AV industry. I'm going to make a horrible generalization here, but it doesn't really happen. And I think that there's a massive opportunity for the whole UX thing, but that takes that really involves flipping the proposition, where you start by talking to users, and really it's a pre-technology consideration. It's thinking about what the room needs to be in terms of deliverables, because in a way there's a kind of a collusion in this whole food chain, where in the end everyone's the kind of the tacit thing is, okay, well, what's the bit of kit we've got to buy that's going to solve all of our problems? Whereas really, let's just go 2 steps backwards and start at basic principles.
The person is really going to use it, and that's the thing we really need to do.
That's where we really stand out. Really, is like with user adoption and the way we take. We now, because all we really do now is MTR, is taking that for us. It's taking that client on a journey, and it's to talk to them, find out what their needs are, what their users' needs are, before we even start looking at what's next.
Yeah, I would just put in a little prompt here because of ICSA, we've got a new UX standard coming out, user experience design for audio visual, and what we've been doing with that. There have been some real UX superstars in that group. I'm just in it as a kind of a standards writer. I think that will have a lot of relevance to this conversation, and I think this time next year that will have hopefully it'll have a big impact on this conversation. Add another kind of dimension, a bit more colour to it.
So I think we've definitely covered now why Microsoft Teams Rooms offers like this easier experience than just having, going into a meeting room and spending 12 minutes trying to fix everything. And we've also started to touch on what do you really need to be successful. So we've talked about different ways of talking to the customer to establish the needs or to the end user beforehand. Once you've done that, and Greg, you've also talked about how things could have gone a little bit wrong during the initial rush. There were factors that need to be considered. What are the factors that you really need to get right in a successful Teams Room project? What has to be done correctly? Do you have to adhere to standards? Do you have to have screens of a particular size? Do you have to set the network up correctly, or make sure that your certified devices support each other? I imagine there are a whole lot of factors.
Well,
I think the
Next question.
So, absolutely, yes, you do have to use standards. The door is
That's
locked
the second time.
until we all agree on that.
And you really have to look at your network, because what we see now is we do the implementation, and then now and then we have to go back. It's in most cases really network issues. So what we do now is sit down with the customer and make sure that all the boxes are checked, so that the network prerequisites are all in place before we do the installation, because then we give the customer the very best experience. It's network issues that we run into the most.
It's not even just the network issues, is everything now needs pre-staging, everything needs to be updated, everything. If not, you go into site, customer doesn't have a working room because nobody's done a proper pre-stage, nobody's looked at, and we go back to the standards, go back to the steps that are taken, and those 57 steps I talked about earlier on, everything we're talking about now is within those steps, from the beginning right to the end. We're not reinventing the wheel. Get it right, and the amount of times we're getting customers calling us at the moment and they're saying, we've had a solution put in, it's rubbish, and nobody's following a protocol. And you're right, AV doesn't have a lot of standards. But it's down to you, or us especially, as the integrator and the expert that we're meant to be. We're meant to be able to guide a customer and take them on that journey and deliver the right solution for them. And I think probably us and Kinley are probably two of the better ones at doing it.
Greg, you just published a wonderful white paper on this, right? When we talk about screen size and distance, and can you speak a little bit on that?
Sure. So I've written quite an extensive white paper that I've shared within Microsoft, and I think quite a few of them had a good night's sleep after that. I will be producing a kind of edited version for wider publication, but really the whole thing about the white paper was that was thinking about the room design and the application of standards. The material that Microsoft has been putting out has been absolutely fantastic, and it's kind of like they're a real vision piece for the future. Mm-hmm. But for me, I just want to break that down into bite-sized pieces. What does it actually mean to deliver that? And as we're going to be coming on to front row and the displays, when it does come to the basics of putting a room design together, there are some absolute non-negotiables. And one thing that I feel very strongly is that we're going to have to expect people to move up to much larger display sizes than they're used to before. Yeah. I think there's going to be a lot of developments in terms of aspect ratios and screen layouts, and if people are going to future-proof their spaces to do that, I think they've just got to move up to a much larger display size, full stop. And then I take it through the various steps, because the thing is that if you take a granular approach to this thing and you think about how matte the screen should be, or the viewing angle, just break it all down like that, then you really do have the opportunity to come up with a set of metrics so that you can define what the deliverables of the space should be in terms of measurable metrics, and then work backwards from that, and then think, well, what is the kit, what is the technology that we need in order to deliver that? So that's the quick version.
One question on that. What is your opinion on using one large screen or two screens?
Oh, I'm quite opinionated about that. It's one large screen. I think that there is a place for the twin screens, but I think that actually, if you are making the screens large enough to be able to deliver content, the serious content, to the back of the room, then that makes the displays larger, and it means that you have the risk of the actual in-person participants blocking the view to the screen. And I just don't like a room where you don't have the option anyway of having good centralized content, for the room to gather around. Yeah. But it's horses for courses, but it doesn't stop me from having an opinion. No.
I was going to say, if you think about the real estate you now require within a Teams room, then the larger the screen, the better, is what we tell everybody. What size? Get the biggest screen you can get. Especially, look, Microsoft are developing Teams daily. I think recently 300 new features within Teams. Yeah. Yeah. So you've only got to look at that and look that get the largest screen you can get in straight away, because there's more development, what's going to happen in the future. And I think it has to be done.
I think the elephant in the room is that most account managers are very comfortable selling large format displays, and basically, so that as default they kind of run out of options. I'm generalising horribly at 98 inches, and really, to go above that, and this is what you've shown in your materials, is that you need to think about using projection, and you need to think about direct view LED. You're then up into different spaces, but the issue is that that takes you back to, if you like, classic AV skills. because projection it's a practice. It's not like buying a TV and sticking it on the wall, which actually makes life easy for practitioners. But if you're actually thinking about if this room is going to have 3, 5, 7 years of really good operation, absolute 101 is to make sure there's a damn good big image on the wall.
Yes,
One thing that people really forget, and people are now beginning to think about the disc-gas image size, is that sets the minimum. It's not saying what the image size should be, but this is the absolute minimum. And I think that if you're thinking about naturalistic engagement, having remote participants at life size, we're just moving to much larger image size.
And the challenge that brings is obviously then the camera gets higher and higher and up. So I mean that's the other challenge with larger displays is then you're getting that shot down. Yeah. So that's where the intelligent cameras obviously can start to come in and do some clever stuff around that, because that's a whole new dynamic. The other thing I was just going to add is we're talking about standards. But the biggest thing with regards to MTR is having a certified MTR. Microsoft has done a great job. They have a complete testing labs where they'll certify the platforms. And again, there's the standards for the displays and the AV, but there's then the certified Teams devices. Again, don't cheap out and just drop a PC in the room and put a keyboard and mouse on the table running a Teams client. A certified MTR that's gone through the Teams labs.
One of the things I heard was you even need to be careful that the certified devices work together and support each other. So just because it's there
are the peripherals that sit around it. Obviously, the MTR is the compute, but then you've got obviously you've got the audio speakers, microphones. They need to be MTR certified. The cameras need to be MTR certified. And then there's 2 different platforms. You've got the Android platform and the Windows platform, which are both certified. And some of the newer features are coming to sort of Windows first, and then Android. So front row. Obviously, it's Windows first, and then Android after.
I think Microsoft have actually done a really good job of this at the moment, of the way Android and PC-based systems are actually a lot more equal than what they used to be, and the features are coming out.
There's still quite a difference between them.
They are coming out.
The biggest difference is in security and manageability. Yeah. I think that's one. But I think this whole discussion, I think we need to break it down into 2 chunks.
Okay.
Chunk 1 is you have a room now, right? And you can start, right? So look for a Microsoft Teams certified setup, install it, and you can use Greg's white paper or the docs that we've produced. If you go to docs.microsoft.com and search for meeting room guidance, we have a full guidance on the standard meeting room. And to your point, if you're thinking about, so what should I do with my office? Because the role of the office is changing so much, right? It's not just a place to work, it's more a clubhouse, so to say. So you have to start designing the work for the people that are not in the office now, which is different. So that requires more of a future vision. And then you look more into the, as we call them, the enhanced meeting rooms, right? So if you want to start now, you can start now. And if you're watching this, don't think, oh, it's super complicated and I have to think about all these standards. No, you can start today, but then you start thinking about how do I shape the future of my office and the way that people work, then you can start looking at these enhanced meeting rooms.
Yeah. This is something we already do. We only use the standards at Microsoft, and they're available for everybody, but people aren't using them. Yeah. This is what I find. But we use those standards, and we'll walk into a customer, we'll be very consultative with them, we'll look at the approach, but we never go outside the standards. The standards that Microsoft set are there for a reason. And the reason being is, although we're engaged with Microsoft a lot, I don't think even Microsoft sometimes know what's the next development, what's coming. So by sticking with the standards of the type of camera, the type of audio, the type of display, making sure everything's certified, as new features come, your room's ready for it. Yeah. And I think that's a big key.
It's a repeatability, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know that if you're going to go down a standard and a certified route, you know that then whatever comes down the line, it's going to work with that. You're not going to, you need to ring them for support and them for support. Microsoft can say, we support Teams, MTR rooms on these cameras, these microphones, these speakers, this configuration, this best practice, and you'll get that experience.
We AV guys tend to make it difficult, because we can go in and do a simple setup, It doesn't need to be complex. Just make sure that you make the right decision on the screen size, that you position the camera in the right position, and then in the advanced rooms, then you can say, okay, we need to bring in extra speakers, extra microphones, extra screens or something. But keep it simple and stupid when you kick off with standard rooms. When it's certified,
Microsoft is certifying equipment for a reason.
Yeah.
So use your certified equipment. Teams updates at 2 a.m. every morning. So if there's any updates on that equipment, if your equipment's certified, your equipment updates, everything's ready.
But I'd like to pick up on something that you said there, Michel, because I think that that is a very positive thing to throw into the conversation about starting, having a start point. Because what I'm observing now is that a lot of users actually don't understand what their workflows are going to be. And so I think my cliche of it is encouraging people to, as far as possible, to put in what I call a vanilla option, so that they can actually learn as they are developing the modes of use that they've got in these space, and then from that they can then develop a use case and a more detailed statement of works and bill of materials that they're going to need from that. So I think I'm very, very comfortable hearing you say that.
I think you've also got to think about as well is we're not just talking meeting rooms there. We're talking collab spaces. We're talking Teams live events rooms. We're talking podcast studios. Exactly. It's like this is becoming more and more and more, and we're finding more and more of these cases is. You've only look at connected devices as well. There's lots more to be taken. Exactly. This isn't just a room. Yes, we're talking about simplicity of Teams rooms and how easy they are to use, but then we're talking what's the next. There's bigger spaces. There's more out there. Teams isn't just a Teams. It's a whole microsystem. It's a whole platform, and there's so much more.
Yeah.
So I think we've covered now some of the key issues around screen size, standards, looking at once the screen gets bigger, the need for intelligent cameras to deal with that, and about the idea of starting simply. I think now perhaps look at a recent development. And that's Microsoft Front Row. So I've got very, very excited about Front Row. I think it's a tremendously interesting development. Not everyone knows about it, so would someone like to...
We'll just sit back and relax.
And this is where we usually bring out the big microphone. Front Row is a layout.
Together Mode was the other one, which was earlier last year. Which was
it's a layout. It's a layout. But there is a big difference, right? So we spoke about creating the level playing field. We spoke a little bit about inclusiveness. We spoke a little bit about making it more natural. When I look at a screen and I have all these 49 different pictures, by the way, nobody looks at 49 pictures, but 49 pictures, I'm just gazing, and you're watching now, hoping this camera's on. You're gazing at 49 pictures, but you're not looking at the person. Now with Front Row, we've moved all the videos to the bottom. So now everybody is at eye gaze. So I can actually look the person in the eye now. If you're watching, look you in the eye. What we're going to be adding soon is spatial audio as well. Right? So your brain reacts to where the audio is coming from. Now if there's a person sitting on the left, and the audio is coming from here, my brain gets kind of confused, which leads to more meeting fatigue. Right? With spatial audio, we can tell, okay, so somebody on the left is speaking and we're actually looking at the person from the left. What we're adding now to Front Row, and it's still in preview, and we've learned a lot from the first few months and the feedback that everybody provided, we're adding different components to it. So you have the videos on the bottom, again, for that eye gaze. You have what we call loop components. Initially now it's only raise hands. So if somebody raises their hand, you see them raising their hand. Yeah. On the left side, we'll speak on loop in a bit. The middle section is all for content, right? So that's the PowerPoint or the whiteboard or whatever you're presenting. And then the right side is chat. Again, with the idea in mind that you're creating something where both people in the room and people dialing in virtually are at the same level. So if somebody wants to say something in a call, they raise their hands. You could come to, we spoke about people, if somebody in the room wants something to wants to say something, you kind of want to go back to the school days where the person raises their hand as well, and you can see that on video, right? So we're creating that level playing field. So and then chat is always there. If somebody wants to speak up on chat, they put it in the chat and it's right there. So as I said, currently we only have raise hand on the left side of the screen. Soon we're going to be adding loop components. And what a loop component is, it's a component that you can basically edit from any Microsoft application you want, right? So to make that really a real life scenario, you might prefer working in Outlook, you might want to do it in OneNote, and you might want to do it on Teams. Right now, you can all work in your preferred app in the same component, and it updates in real time. Now we're bringing that to front row, which means that on the screen you can also see and you can pick a list of tasks that you came up with during the meeting. We're going to be adding Cortana to that as well, so she can pick up when I say, hey, I'll create the PowerPoint presentation for next week. It'll pick it up and then you'll see it, and then it's on so nobody's going to say anything anymore.
So something we were speaking about, and you go back to, you start talking front row, and now we're talking the real estate. What size screen do you require?
We'll get there. We'll get there. Yeah. So it's task list, meeting notes, or agenda. Right. You can set the agenda up before the meeting. Again, going back to how do we shape meetings, right? Think about meetings more from a meeting life cycle perspective. There's a before, during, and after the meeting. So you set up the agenda before the meeting. You see it there on the screen. You see everybody at eyesight, and you have all the content in the right places. So that's the deeper dive. But I think the simple explanation of what is front row, it's a layout.
But it's also kind of more an immersive experience. Yes. Like in the early days, you had HPALO and the Polycom immersive suites, and this gives kind of the same experience, which is kind of good.
That's what I've heard. That it's almost bringing back the pre-COVID days of an experience that used to cost a lot of money. To have people, at eye gaze, at eye level.
But again, since it all integrates with everything that happens in Microsoft 365 and in Microsoft Teams, right? You bring everything in one place. So it's not just the telepresence and then chat somewhere on this. No, it's all integrated in this one view. And I think that's the power, again, going back to your first question, right? What's the power of Microsoft Teams Rooms? It's the integration with all the different applications that customers are already accustomed to using.
It's not an AV meeting anymore. It's when you're in a meeting, you can do chat, you can raise your hand, you can work together in the same document. It's a complete environment, an ecosystem even. So it's not only the meeting room, it's everything.
And is this where the Teams integration with Windows helps out? I've heard that Teams is this great thing. It's kind of almost like as important as the operating system. And these loop components presumably will enable you to bring things in onto the screen. As well as having that.
I don't have the answer to that, but in my brain, I think of it as a Meta OS.
Yeah.
Right. So it's the one gateway to everything, and I think that's what Teams can become. Again, that's not based on anything I've heard. Mm-hmm. It's just based on the feeling that I have where things are going. It's the entry point to everything that's happening.
Yeah, and you can control it again. You're controlling the operating system, the security, the patching, and all of that. It's control. You own the operating system, you own the application, so you have that deeper level of integration. And
it also means that our Teams team needs to work with the Windows team. Yeah. Right? So one of the things that we learned in the first few weeks of launching the preview of Front Row is that what Windows does, the bigger the screen get, the higher the scaling sets. The default scaling. So that sets to 150 and 175%. If you then look at front row, the scaling is off, right? So you need to take that back. So for everybody watching, if you see a weird experience, bring the scaling back to 100%. For now, set your resolution to 1080p, right? And then you get the full experience. But that's something that we learned how we needed to work between different divisions within the company to make that experience better.
Does Microsoft look at front row as being the standard layouts for every room?
I think going back to your point, and I'm curious to hear your opinion, but going back to your point, not every room has the same function. So it goes back to, if you think about meetings or rooms or collaboration spaces being more function-based, activity based, right? So if you're going into brainstorm, and we're all standing, it's a standing meeting. Front row doesn't make sense, right? Because then you're basically looking at my belly, which has gotten a lot bigger over. That's a whole different story. I won't get into that. Right? Yeah. Right? So there, front row doesn't make sense at all. There, you want to have the service hub or the neat board in there to do the whiteboarding. So I think you need to look at what's the activity, and again, I'm curious to hear your opinion. Need to look at the activity in the room, and then based off of that, pick whatever you want to pick. Yeah.
I think that again goes back to that conversation we had just a minute ago when we talk about different rooms. It's not just a meeting room.
Yes.
We're talking different spaces, different uses, and again, we go back to Jeff and the standards on screens, and we talk about, is a 16:9 screen right anymore in certain rooms? And again, it's like
Is projection coming back into the meeting room?
LED.
That's the interesting
This is on you, Cook.
Perhaps we need to explain. Front row allows 21:9 and not just 60. It will allow 32:9. Is that a yes?
So again, don't get me in trouble. Don't get me in trouble with the big boss. But I know we're taking all of the feedback that we got from the preview, and we're looking at the dimensions, and should it be 32:9, 21:9, and then some people asking about 4K, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But right, but we keep asking it. But that's also stuff that we're looking into, right? So we're learning.
4K is code.
But with what we have now, so 21:9 is possible, and also with front row, you have the people in the gallery at the bottom, you have the content above them, you have the loop components at the sides.
Yeah.
Does that change both what you'd need in a screen and the technology that you will use to provide that screen for that use case where front row makes sense?
So just to take it back a step and to where Michel was kind of introducing it, I think that what we're seeing is like the beginning of a journey here, and it's very much work in progress. We don't know. Microsoft is showing, at the Hive 32:9 installed systems, which is why Guy asked the question legitimately whether or not you guys are going to go ahead and
maybe to explain, so the Hive is a place where we test all new scenarios, right? So again, we take the feedback coming from the field and all the great stuff that engineering is doing, and we're testing it in real life environment. So that's where you saw the 32.
So I think the thing that front row as a layout now throws up is actually in itself is there are challenges and questions there, because I think the thing is that if you're still going to want to show content that people can see, then and that's effectively a picture-in-picture thing, then there's a challenge there. I think if you're going to want the remote participants at a reasonable size, then that again makes for a larger picture. But I think that there are actually some of the basic assumptions about displays. I think the front row really opens out some possibilities, because we have fairly classic ideas about what the image baseline should be, the distance from the floor to the bottom of the image. And I think that if you think about being in a meeting where we're in person, where you're kind of used to seeing our bellies or not, going down and disappearing. I think that in front row there's a case for having some a much larger real estate where you actually have you have the people going down and effectively disappearing from view, because that's how it is in real life. But I also think that relatively few spaces, in my view, are going to opt for, if you like, a full-time front row experience. There will be.
I'm seeing it though. I'm seeing some customers that use one or two rooms, especially. And I think if you look at SMBs, right? Generally, I don't think they would go for a scenario like this. unless they want to be very much forward thinking. When I look at big customers, more and more I'm seeing that have at least one or two of these rooms.
Should be a blend, wouldn't there? You know, again, there's
Don't get me wrong, there is absolutely a place for it. However, I also think that there will be a number of spaces which will want to be able to operate multiple modes of use.
Yes.
And
Agreed.
Front Row will be an option of that. And that just takes us back to one large image. And that will involve projection, but it does involve projection being done to a different standard than it's been done in the past.
Now, from certain brands who develop a 21:9 screen, which I like, because going back to projection, it's not, in my opinion, not the way to go, because you're depending on the light that falls into the room, and if the projector is mounted to a certain ceiling which is not stable, then the image drops. So that I don't think it's but looking at the resolution we need.
There have been a lot of developments there, and all the time. This time, when I've been working in simulation immersive displays, the advances in projection and technology and screen technologies is massive. It is difficult because it's not just hanging a thing on the wall. But again, if you go back to basics and you go back to the DISCAS standard, it's all predicated on image height. And these 105-inch displays that are coming out now, they're really lovely, and I believe there's going to be some interesting technology involving cameras, which people go and have a look at here. However, they've got limited height, and so they will only serve a room up to a certain. It's a squaring the circle issue. Once you get above a room above certain depth, or have viewers beyond a certain point, farthest viewers, then it just kind of throws the thing open, and the projection is part of the mix.
What if you change the setup of the room itself, right? So instead of going full bowling alley, right, turn the table around, landscape it, all the people here, and then people might say, yeah, but then you have people sitting on one side and then people sitting on the other side with their backs towards the camera. Now, if we look at some of the stuff that's in the Work Trend Index, large meetings are actually getting less, right? So we'll have less meetings with a lot of people. So my thinking is maybe it can be not bowling alley, but then the other way around, where you have the camera on the long side of the room instead of the short side of the room. Right there, you have the 1, 2, whatever screens, and then you have everybody in that more front rowish.
The far end, you're going to get a better experience, but again, we're in a kind of semicircle here, and obviously if I'm looking at you versus I'm kind of doing the kind of here. So if we had a table, the in-person would be better because I'll be looking across the table like this, but so the in-person would be better, but then the far end would then get a shot at the side of my face, and then I have to switch around and switch back again.
Because it's no different than from what it is now. If we're all at a long table, right? So if it would have been, how many are we? 6 of us. It would have been 12 of us around this long table, and it would be bowling alley style. We would still have to do this if we're in the room. It doesn't make a difference whether you do it bowling alley style or the other way around. The in-room table is the in-room table, and it's the same experience. The big difference now is that you're making it easier for the people that are dialing in virtually. So you're designing again the room for the people that are not
also
there.
based on the activity and the number of people that should
Of course,
But
yes.
what you see more and more when the people are in a bowling alley setup, that they switch on, that they dial in themselves and switch on the camera and switch off the mic, of course, because then you can really see them.
But then the real advancements comes when we can start to cascade cameras in the room. So we're not just having one camera looking down the room. We've got one down the room, one on the side, and depending if I'm looking over here, the intelligence will go, okay, he's talking, he's looking at that camera, versus she's talking, she's looking at that camera, to be able to switch it. So you can have the bowling room experience, but then the far end don't get that side of the face shot. It will choose using the intelligence as to what
vendors looking into that possibility with
again,
AI supported
with
supported
demoing
cameras.
understand with our One Beyond acquisition.
Do you know
that
what
we'll
it
show
comes
here.
down to? Yet again, all of this, what we're saying, we're talking is that customer journey. It's talking. Jeff pointed out, not a lot of people are actually going and speaking to the customer, sitting down with them, sitting down with them, and basically taking their needs, how they're going to use the different spaces, and then specifying to their needs. They're just, here's a system, throw it in, or I can do Teams
Big
rooms.
telly on the wall.
Yeah.
Drop in the camera. Next.
Yeah.
I think you're talking about curved layouts, though. I think that that will be that is quite a basic thing. We're developing curved screen displays because we think that will make for more inclusive experiences. It's a nicer feeling like this, but I mean. It just goes to show the range of options that we're going to have to be working with in the future.
But it's going to be that blend, isn't there, across the estate? I think I'd say you're going to have 10-20% front row, studio style rooms with the curved screen, smaller huddle rooms that are going to be just 2 or 3, the open plan, high back sofas and a screen at the end in open spaces. So this blended experience across those different environments.
And we are the advisors for the customer, so we should talk to them, look at the activities they're going to implement into the rooms, where they're going to use the rooms for, and then say, okay, this is the type of room you need, and this is the number of room, and this is where you need front row, for example.
Yeah, that's why partners are so important to us at Microsoft, right? Because you help us to help customers understand what they don't know, right? Because you don't know what you don't know, right? Yeah. So, and I think that's why partners are so important for us, to really share that vision that we have and echo that to the customers, to then build these experiences.
And one thing, the one thing I was going to say is that's why I think it's important for any client out there that's looking to do Teams rooms. Look for a certified Microsoft partner. Look for somebody that believes in the vision and understands where things are going.
But also very important, which we didn't touch yet, is although it's very easy to use, still help the customer on board all these people using the Microsoft Teams rooms. Because they walk in, and even if there's only one button they need to press to join a meeting, they're still kind of scared to. You have to take them by the hand and take them through every step they can do, bring in content.
Adoption is a massive thing.
Very important to make it a success for the customer.
Yeah.
And then it's a good investment that he's
getting away from that laminate on the table.
Those times are gone. Really
Well, I think we've covered quite a lot of ground so far. I'm going to, I was particularly interested in some of the future-facing stuff, not just front row, but positional audio. I'm really looking forward to that. I know there are manufacturers who are very keen on it too. I think maybe I'll spring something on you, which is if you have a technology manager at an end user organization now, looking at this, having heard this discussion, what advice, if you had to kind of sum up the thing that could go wrong, that they really need to look at, that they really need to get right, what advice would you give the viewer?
I can honestly tell you the first thing is, do not go cheap. Do not go, we've got X amount for these rooms, that's what we're doing. If you can only afford to do 3 rooms right, do 3 rooms right. Don't do 6 rooms wrong.
Right.
And that is the biggest thing we're seeing all the time. And there's a lot of people out there at the moment, a lot of companies that seeing that Teams has exploded, and that everybody's a Teams room expert now.
Yeah.
And you walk in and the wrong camera's in there, the wrong audio. They've used a system that's not fit for purpose, and they're calling themselves a Teams room expert.
Yeah.
Stick with the certified companies like Kinley, like Project AV, that are Microsoft partners. Stick with us. This is what we do day in, day out, and you do get the benefits. Yeah.
But it's also very important, we always have to approach people, process, technology, because when we talk to the IT departments, in most cases say, I want this vendor, I want this vendor into my meeting room. Yeah. But we say, okay, but first look at the people, how they're going to use it, what's the process, but also look at how you want to manage it. But keep in mind that all the rooms are going to be IT managed. Yeah. So do you want to do it yourself? Yeah. Do you want us to do it? Because we can do it for you, but you have to make the decision. And then we can decide, okay, which brand, which vendor suits you best. Yeah. But then we make a choice on technology, but not in front. So always at the end, because you have to check off all the boxes to make sure the customer makes the right choices.
We've seen it on lots, and I know you have as well, John, is you've walked in, the customer's been sold a dream, they haven't put certified equipment in, and then they're calling and saying, my room doesn't work. Why? Because it's not been specified properly. Yeah. Just get your room specified right, get them specified by an expert, make sure the right equipment's gone in, and then everything that Microsoft are doing after, you're certified, you're there. We rigorously stick to Microsoft's guidelines. We do not go outside them. Anybody wants to go outside Microsoft's guidelines, we say to them, good luck, because we wouldn't do that. We're a Microsoft partner for a reason. Stick to the guidelines.
Yeah, but pick the right choice. If you look at management, not all the equipment, all the peripheral is easy to manage from on site or from remote. You know, that's something you really have to keep in mind. If you want to do it yourself, okay, then there's a lot of choices. If you want us to do it, we need to have remote access. We need to make sure that we can do remote issue solving, but then make the right choice on that one.
Again, you've made a really, really good point there, is we go back to the old-fashioned way of working, and we now look the way we've changed, and we've changed since COVID. I look, if we get the right equipment in and we got that on a right managed platform, at the moment our support desk is fixing 93% of all faults without going to site. Now that is the difference of what Teams, certified equipment, and using the right platform has given us as a business.
Premium and all these stuff.
I think the other dynamic is a lot of businesses are trying to get people back into the offices.
Yeah.
We're all loving working from home, and why should I go back into the office? What am I going to get if I go back to the office? And if that first day that they come back into the office, they're going to get a poor experience because the kit doesn't work or that it's not certified, they go, I'll work from home. My setup at home is great.
That is really the truth.
So that is really important, I think, is they get it right first of all, don't scrimp, don't cheap out. Read Greg's white paper, obviously.
We'll be reading that.
And then we do the implementation.
But again, do it right first time, because you only have that one choice with the person in the business who's been working from home 2 years, and they come back into the office. It's the place to be. Engage more. And they're going to come in and go,
we see it all the time when we get called in a client and they'll say, oh, this system is rubbish. It's not the system, it's just been implemented in the wrong place. The amount of systems I'm going in where the camera is really 3.5 to 5 metre camera, and we're walking in and it's a 12 metre room, and they're wondering why. It's just wrong. Stick to Microsoft's guidelines.
Yeah, so my answer here would be, pick the right partner. That's one. I agree there. Right? Start with people. Start with people. I love the processes and technology part. And then, to your point, make sure that you turn features into experiences. That's the thing that's really going to drive the big difference here. It's not about technology. As much as we, as MTR nerds that we are, and I think that's a very good term, right? I love to be the MTR nerd, right? But we as MTR nerd, we like to default back into features and technology. The average customer simply does not care, and they shouldn't care, right? So it starts with people, it ends with people. In the middle, I agree, there's processes, there's technologies, but it's all about how do we turn the features into real-life experiences.
And it's also kind of a completely different thing. It's policy. The company needs to have the right policy on, okay, when do people come into the office? When can they work from home? And they need to accept that that's going to give a cultural change. Because you offer flexibility with Microsoft Teams, not only Teams Rooms, with complete platform of Microsoft. And an async working, for example, so you can do your things at home and because you can make a recording, not attend the meeting, but watch the recording afterwards, so it saves you time. So there's a lot of issues changing in the organization, which also will give cultural changes, because people don't like to work in the morning, for example, and start working in the evening. So that's something customers really, really have to keep in mind. It's just not only implementing techniques.
An hour on that stuff.
That's the next session. Let's do the next session.
Part two.
We'll be there back tomorrow.
Any final words, Greg?
No, not really, because I think that we've covered it really well. But I think Michel's point about the people and having this pre-technology take on the space is absolutely fundamental to doing it. I think that there's a fantastic future there. But I think the thing with Microsoft is that you've effectively provided a campfire around which these thoughts can develop. Things are going to change a lot this year, and at quite a high speed. And it's just thinking about how we can put spaces in now that can be resilient and have enough flexibility to take care of and to be able to adopt what we put in the future without throwing away stuff now, mis-speccing stuff at the early stages.
Yeah, it gives the customer the best experience by making the right choices and making it manageable for the customer. I think that's very, very important.
If we get it right for the customer, they can then empower their workforce, and this is all we want to do.
Got it. Okay, well, I'd like to thank all of our guests.
Thank you.
Michel, Greg, Neil, Steve, and John. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you for sharing your expertise in this area. And I very much hope that the viewers will go forth and implement Microsoft Teams rooms thoughtfully and follow the processes that we've discussed here, and that the projects will be a success and will benefit from it. So thank you very much for joining us.